You're listening to Talk of Champions, an Ole Miss Spirit podcast with Ben Garrett.
It's time! It's time! It's time! It's time! It's time!
It is game week, Ole Miss Rebel fans. Game week. You are here. The long wait is over. It's like in Game of Thrones when Ned Stark, or any of the Starks, or anybody for that matter, would say, winter is coming. And then it took about 7 seasons, but it came! We didn't have to wait that long. We didn't have to wait that long for Ole Miss football. It is back this week. On Saturday, Ole Miss takes on Furman to open an expectations-filled 2024-25 season. Just days now. Just days. Unfortunately, no depth chart released. I know. That's the question I've gotten the most. Not, hey, Ben, do you think they can win a title? Hey, Ben, who's going to be the starting center? We'll talk about that. This, that, and the other. It's been, hey, wait a minute. Is there a depth chart? No, there's not one. Lane doesn't prefer. He'd rather not release one. Even though it's not like he's trying to get an advantage and a competitive advantage against Furman necessarily, even though Furman is a very good team. That's a 10-win team from FCS last year. Went on an 8-game winning streak, only snapped in the playoffs. It's a good team. Old years, you maybe would have been a little nervous. But this isn't Jeremiah Masoli. Well, Jeremiah Masoli was good, but this is not that Jacksonville State game. Unfortunately, we associate that team and that loss with Jeremiah Masoli, who was actually good. We should always associate it with Houston Nutt. And how Tig Barksdale's the one that went in on the 2-point conversion. He was supposed to be a starting safety. The next Ed Reed, but he wasn't. But that's neither here nor there because we've made it, folks. It's game week for Ole Miss football. And today on this edition of Talk of Champions, brought to you, as always, by RiverLand Roofing here in the RiverLand Roofing studios. For all your roofing needs, call them, text them. Go to their website today, riverlandroofing.com. It's the place to be. We're going to talk about a depth chart. It's my best guess. My best projections of a depth chart. I wrote about it on the Ole Miss Spirit, OleMissSpirit.com, and Fleet of On 3. You should go there today. Not because you should do it anyway, but because right now, kickoff only a couple days away. Folks, you can get an annual sub for half off. All you got to do is use promo code KICKOFF24 when you sign up for the Ole Miss Spirit, OMSpirit.com today. An annual sub, which usually $10, $5 today, and we're talking about this all day, every day. And I wrote about the depth chart on the Ole Miss Spirit this morning. But I thought for the podcast, I'd dive even a little bit further into it. Every one of these positions, as I wrote on the Spirit, are laid out on this podcast. However, each one of them has a, quote, Talk of Champions add-on. So because you're listening and watching or whatever, this podcast, you can get a little extra sauce, a little extra. And also, I've got 3 anchor players for Ole Miss in 2024-25. And you might wonder, what the hell is an anchor player? I'm a nerd, admittedly. Self-professed. Deadpool and Wolverine recently came out. I'm not going to spoil anything, but a big part of that is anchor beings in the Marvel universe. In that comic book universe. Anchor beings, like, you got to have them. They're the ones that if anything happens, you could be in some trouble. And of course, Jaxson Dart is one of them. But the other 2 are they're going to surprise you. But first, we get to the depth chart. Now, there's no guarantee that Ole Miss releases a depth chart by Furman, because media practice viewing was originally scheduled for today on this Tuesday, August, 27th, 2024, day after my father Mark's birthday. Happy birthday to my dad. We were originally scheduled to view some practice like we always have throughout camp, about 5 periods on Tuesday. That was axed at the last minute. Lane shut it down. Locking it in. I love it. Put on the pads. Strap it up. Have y'all seen the hype video? It's time. Fire it up. But that was done. We don't get to look and see, so we don't know exactly what the depth chart is. And then Lane doesn't talk again until Wednesday when he jumps on the SEC teleconference call. But we at the Ole Miss Spirit, if it wasn't me, it was Jake Thompson. If it wasn't Jake Thompson, it was Chuck Ronsville. If it wasn't Chuck and Jake, it was me or it was Zach. We have been at every single practice this preseason. And what this will be is my very best stab at what we think at the Spirit. We at the Spirit think the lineup could be come Furman for the Rebels. Saturday, 6 p.m. Central Time on ESPN Plus, SEC Network Plus. But remember, this is all purely my projections. It cannot be taken as gospel. There's probably 100% chance that a lot of this will be wrong because Lane is unpredictable. That's the fun thing about covering him. But let's go to it anyway. Ole Miss's starting offensive quarterback, it's Jaxson Dart. But who's the backup? We've talked about it here on Talk of Champions a couple of times now. And if you don't know the answer to this, tisk. Walker Howard would likely get the call if Jaxson Dart had to come out of a game or miss extended time. But Austin Simmons is right there and has done nothing but absolutely impressed since he arrived last offseason. And remember, this is a player who was ranked a 4-star across 2 classes. He reclassified up 2 classes to come to Ole Miss early. And in both of those classes, despite the talent around him, was still considered a 4-star prospect in both classes. The question, of course, with Austin is what? What is it? We know he got hurt throwing the ball as a pitcher in baseball. Now, he's looked fine throughout fall camp. Doesn't look limited, but we only get limited practice viewing. He's still working his way back to 100%. So it's Walker Howard. This is the Talk of Champions add-on for the quarterback section of the depth chart. Walker Howard is next up, okay? I feel pretty confident in that. If, God forbid, something happened against Furman and a quarterback needed to take snaps right now, it's going to be Walker Howard. He's earned it. He really has. And I'm going to go ahead and admit something I never really thought I would admit. Maybe last year I wouldn't have admitted here publicly out of fear that the message boards would revolt. I was not a big Walker Howard believer coming into the year. And that has changed since seeing his work in the spring, seeing how his teammates specifically talk about him. See how he works his way around that locker room, how he interacts with his teammates. He's a leader, and he's a backup quarterback, but he's a leader. Absolutely. So I think Walker has earned that opportunity, but that's not to say that Ole Miss doesn't love Austin Simmons. Absolutely loves Austin Simmons. Walker Howard's just further along developmentally and would give Ole Miss the best chance to win initially, in my opinion. Now, the upside, Austin Simmons has probably got that. Probably got Walker Howard on that. But again, I wasn't a Walker Howard believer, and now I am because it's just different. Running back, who's the starter? Ulysses Bentley. The backup, Henry Parrish Jr. Who's the third? This has been the question, something we've talked about here on Talk of Champions all preseason. Is there a third running back? I say Rashad Amos right now. The transfer from Miami of Ohio. Now, Ulysses Bentley has dealt with injury every single year he's been an Ole Miss Rebel. But when he's healthy, there are few, if any, running backs in the SEC, which means the country better. And I'm not just saying that as an Ole Miss homer to you. I'm saying that because Pro Football Focus graded Ulysses Bentley IV as the highest graded returning running back in the SEC. But Ole Miss needs Logan Diggs. Y'all have heard me say it on the pod, but it needs to be reinforced. Ole Miss needs Logan Diggs, the transfer from Notre Dame, LSU, to get healthy. He would just bring a dynamic that they don't have in that room, at least in the limited time that we've gotten to see. Maybe Rashad Amos is more game player than practice player. We've seen that a lot. Bo Wallace was the prime example of that. Bo Wallace was not a practice player. Actually, the year when he had to beat out Barry Brunetti and Zach Stout and Randall Mackey, beating, I guess in quotes, air quotes, the reason it was even a competition is because Bo Wallace just wasn't a good practice player. And maybe that is the case with a Rashad Amos, but we haven't gotten to see nearly enough of him to make that kind of judgment. I will admit that today. I will admit that right here and now. And he did run for just 2 less touchdowns last year than Quinshon Judkins. So I don't want to pretend like I can make any reasonable determination about what Rashad Amos and his value could be to Ole Miss this year. But right now, the way I'm sitting here, a couple days before Ole Miss kicks off against Furman, I'm still like, man, they need some Logan Diggs. They need a Logan Diggs at the end of October, mid-October. They kick off SEC play September 28th against Kentucky. That'd be a great time for Logan Diggs to be available. Because right now, from what I've seen, it's Ulysses Bentley, and Henry Parrish. And Bentley, for one, has had durability concerns, issues his entire Ole Miss career since he transferred in from SMU. Now, 3 wide receivers. The starters I'm predicting the depth chart, Trey Harris, backed up by Devin Price. That's on the outside. Devin Price is the transfer from FAU. In the slot, Jordan Watkins is the starter, backed up by Caden Lee. And then on the outside, Juice Wells, backed up by Aiden Williams. Now, is Juice healthy? He played in the mock game on Saturday. It was really good. But I don't want to get anybody too hyped up about Juice, only because you got to see if he can maintain, right? We know what he can be if he's healthy. And he's flashed that at times with some rest. But can you do it over an elongated amount of time? Can you play the games? Can you hold up? Can you be that dynamic playmaker, not just in a short mock game scrimmage session, but over the course of a months-long schedule of games in the SEC, the toughest conference in America? Because Ole Miss has taken it easy with Jordan Watkins and Juice Wells all throughout fall camp. And both were almost exclusively in black non-contact jerseys. But the thing is like I said, Juice Wells, full participant in that mock game on Saturday. And Jordan Watkins is in his 3rd year starting for Ole Miss, not just at wide receiver, but as their primary returner. Ole Miss, in my opinion, has just been cautious with most all of them in black jerseys this preseason. And we have no reason to believe otherwise because that's what the coaches and players have said themselves. But Jordan Watkins especially. I'm not worried about Jordan Watkins and his availability for Furman. How much he plays, well, that remains to be seen because Caden Lee has been really good all camp. And he's earned an opportunity to not only start, but play the lion's share of snaps for Furman specifically. Deion Smith still nowhere to be found. I know that would be the question after I jumped away from wide receivers. But Ben, Deion Smith, he's nowhere to be found. But I've got, as I said, Trey Harris, Devin Price, Jordan Watkins, Caden Lee in the slot. Juice Wells is the starter, backed up by Aiden Williams, who's had a great camp. I wouldn't be surprised if Caden Lee starts, like I said, because he's earned it. He's already a player I've picked as the offensive breakout player of the year for Ole Miss. But more than that, he's inarguably been one of, if not the most consistent practice receivers throughout camp. The only reason it's arguable is because Trey Harris was called by Lane Kiffin the most improved player of camp as already one of the very best players on this team. In my opinion, for my money, the best player on this team. I mean, you look at Trey Harris, and he should be in the NFL already. He should. To Ole Miss's credit, he's not. To Ole Miss's credit in bringing him back for a title chase, he's not. Because that guy is an NFL receiver, but I'm not so sure that Caden Lee has not been most consistent as far as every practice being that target monster in the slot. Great route runner. Maybe Aiden Williams starts too, because he's been very good this fall camp. I wouldn't be surprised, because in my opinion, after watching this camp, that was a question for me. The future at wide receiver, it's easy to go bring in a bunch of hired guns or mercenaries, or whatever you want to call them, transfers. The future at wide receiver has never been more promising than it is to me today because of not only Caden Lee. Aiden Williams had a really good camp, but we've all seen it and heard that before from Caden. His camp last year was a lot like that. But he doesn't have to be the next great Ole Miss number one like Laquan or A.J. Brown or Jonathan Mingo. Not this year. That's all the talk was wearing the number one, he's balling out at camp. Aiden Williams, go be that dude. Anything short of that was going to be disappointing as far as expectations. That pressure is gone for Aiden Williams. And he admitted it. If you've watched this podcast for any length of time, you heard from Aiden on one of the last ones. And he mentioned it, that some of that praise and hyping him up in the preseason, he felt it. That's gone because Juice Wells, he's been through those wars before. So all Caden Lee, Jordan Watkins, been through those wars before. Trey Harris, been through those wars before. So Caden Lee and Aiden Williams, though they could start, potentially will start Saturday. Whenever they come in, it doesn't matter. They're going to play a lot, and they don't have to worry about anything but just making the plays when they're there. You don't have to be anything more than yourself. You are enough, Aiden Williams. You are enough. You don't have to be the next number one. Just go do what you do because he's got freakish athletic tools. You see it on display. The circus catches this fall camp. Trey Harris, of course. Aiden Williams does just as many. This is a huge, huge year for the development and future of Aiden Williams specifically at Ole Miss. Offensive line, first team from left to right, Jaden Williams or Diego Pounds. Nate Caleppo at left guard, Jerquan Scott at center, Julius Buelo at right guard, and Micah Pettis at right tackle. The second team I have as Jaden Williams or Diego Pounds. Eli Acker at left guard, Caleb Warren or Reese McIntyre at center, Jeremy James at right guard, and Preston Cushman at right tackle. And I'm not going to talk much more about Preston Cushman, but again, great camp for him. Keep an eye on him. Wearing number 55, got a lot of Ben Brownish in him. You know, he looks a lot like a Ben Brown. Jeremy James and Caleb Warren specifically have been multi-year starters for the Ole Miss offensive line. They could be first-teamers against Furman. They've rotated in. Jeremy James could play starting at right guard, at right tackle. Caleb Warren could start at center because Jerquan Scott has been a little banged up. But Caleb Warren has transitioned primarily to guard and could open with his versatility at left guard. There's no set rotation or starting lineup for any of these positions yet. But I think that's most true on the offensive line because they have so many options. The only thing we know, I think, for sure is that Jerquan Scott is the starting center for your Ole Miss Rebels in 2024-25. And yeah, he's been banged up at times during camp. And Caleb Warren was a 3-year starter at center. But man, Jerquan Scott has dominated that job since camp started. I am curious if Caleb Warren maybe starts against Furman or plays more than Jerquan Scott. If Jerquan Scott plays it off, they hold him out. He's been banged up. Maybe that changes the depth chart for Furman. But long term, as Ole Miss embarks on this title chase, Jerquan Scott is your starting center. But then think about the depth behind him. The snap issues that were such a disaster. You remember those snap issues? You're like, God, there was nobody behind Caleb Warren when he dealt with him to then replace him and push him, and they tried some different guys. If it's not Jerquan Scott, it is Caleb Warren. If it's not Caleb Warren, it is Reese McIntyre, who's a six-year offensive lineman who started a lot of games. Bryson Sanders is a former 4-star prospect that they're still very high on. Maybe he would get some run. But I'm fascinated by, particularly the snap share of Jaden Williams and Diego Pounds at left tackle because Jaden Williams took a step back last year. He started every game as a redshirt freshman at left tackle for Ole Miss, and they won double-digit games, 10 games for the first time in school history, or in the regular season in school history. But then Diego Pounds, he's motivated too. He transferred over from North Carolina in his money-making year for the NFL, and after blocking the blind side for one Drake May, who's about to start as a rookie for the New England Patriots. And again, to reemphasize this, in his money year, not to compete, to start, it just shows, first of all, credit to Jaden Williams, but also the depth of this team, the depth of this offensive line. These two motivated players that in any other year, because of their talent, Ole Miss would have started both of them somewhere. They don't have to this year. They don't have to.
Protecting homes and businesses from the whims of nature, you need more than just quality materials. You require RiverLand Roofing. Licensed, insured, and certified, RiverLand Roofing offers not only the assurance of excellence, but a tailored approach to your unique structural needs and budget. To learn more about what RiverLand Roofing can do for you and the community, call them at 662-644-4297 or visit riverlandroofing.com.
Now, at tight end, it's pretty simple. It's Caden Priestcorn as the starter. Backup is Daquan Wright. He was all-league at Virginia Tech last year. And then Hudson Wolf is the next man up. Hudson Wolf is 87 or 88. I think I've been seeing him wear 88. Maybe that's a scout team thing. But Daquan Wright, number 8. When you see that big guy opposite Caden Priestcorn busting seams, you'll know who it is. Keep an eye on them. That's the offense. Now, defense, you start first at strong side defensive end, where the tight end lines up. And that is where you'll find Jared Ivey as the starter. Now, backing up Jared, my guy, and y'all are going to love this. The number 1 prospect in Mississippi in last year's recruiting class, a pet project for second-year Ole Miss defensive coordinator Pete Golding. It's Cam Franklin. And I'm a big fan of Cam Franklin. The thing about Cam, he wears number 14, before anybody asks. You'll notice he's huge, but he's thin. Putting him with Jared Ivey is perfect because Jared was the exact same way. What Jared Ivey is today is ideally what Cam Franklin will be sooner rather than later. That's why it fits perfectly. Chris Hardy's been good. He's all league. He was all league at Jacksonville State, number 91. And yet he's the next up because Jared and Cam have been good. But that shows the depth, again, of how good Ole Miss can be. Defensive tackle starter, J.J. Pegues, the Chucky Mullins Award winner. Congratulations. No better choice than J.J. Pegues. So number 38 at home, number 89 on the road, Xavier Harris. That's a tricky one. And then next up is Akilo Stone. Defensive tackle, starting Walter Nolan, and then backing him up. Jamarius Brown has been balling out in the spring, earning praise from everybody, coaches, players, on into the summer, and now in the fall. He is backing up Walter Nolan at that 3-tech spot. And he's number 96, and he's ready to break out. He was close to being my pick for breakout on defense. I went with T.J. Daugherty just because you could technically go with him, even though he's more of a proven commodity than Jamarius. But Jamarius is just getting so much shine and praise in this offseason. And the next up is William Eccles. Brown has inarguably been, Jamarius Brown, the biggest riser over weeks and weeks of spring and now fall Ole Miss football practices. He's one you got to watch. Princely, recovering from that foot injury. And as we've been talking about here on Talk of Champions, sources indicate he could be used strictly in a situational role in those early games. Ole Miss, remember, plays 4 non-con games before opening SEC play against Kentucky September 28th. But here's the Talk of Champions add-on just for you. Akilo Stone would be a starter on almost every other Ole Miss team. He started one game last year, appeared in all 12, but this year he would be starting almost every other Ole Miss team, and he is third. Xavier Harris, I bet, is back from his suspension for the domestic issue by late September, maybe October. That's an ugly situation, but you let it play out, and the feeling I get is that he'll probably be back by late September. We'll see. But William Eccles, again, one of the nation's biggest risers in the 2024 recruiting class. We talk all about Cam Franklin being the number 1 prospect in the country, in the state, Mississippi, last year. William Eccles gave him a run for his money. He started out as a middling 3-star prospect in the teens in Mississippi. Ended up right up there in the top, right behind Cam. Number 124 overall, 4-star, tabbed, like I mentioned, an on-3 freshman All-American. I could see him taking over a starting role of all the freshmen sooner than all the other ones. Now, I'm not saying it's over Walter Nolan. I'm not saying it's over. I'm just saying he's that good. He's that advanced. He's a ready-made step-in-and-play kind of guy. He was the freshman All-American, not Cam Franklin, not Jeffrey Rush or Cam Beavers, both of which were 4-star prospects in that class too. It was William Eccles. He has the opportunity to be special and special very, very quickly. So look out for him, number 52 on defense as early as Furman on Saturday, because with a team like Furman, capable, competitive, good enough, William Eccles should get a lot of run. Linebacker, there are 2 of them in a 4-2-5 Pete Golding defense. The starter is T.J. Daugherty, backed up by Tyler Banks. The other linebacker is Chris Pooh-Paul, the transfer from Arkansas, or Kari Coleman. And we covered this on a recent podcast. I'm not going to go too in-depth about linebacker. For the first time in what seems like forever, Ole Miss has real linebacker depth. And don't sleep on Raymond Collins either. He's a JUCO transfer, and he's flashed all camp. Now, at cornerback, one is Trey Amos starting, the transfer from Alabama, backed up by Brandon Turnage, the transfer from Tennessee and Alabama. Then next up is T.J. Banks, who's had a great camp as a true freshman, number 19. Great camp. Same with Trey Amos, number 9. He's been going against Trey Harris every single day. Brandon Turnage, number 8, is getting healthy. And if they do have to run out a nickel corner, it'll be Brandon Turnage, I figure. Opposite them, at cornerback, is Isaiah Hamilton, the transfer from Houston, or Chris Graves. That's 3 and 32 for those of you keeping score at home. Next up is Richard O'Brien. And then at safety, John Saunders Jr., followed by Jaden Kennedy. That's that hybrid linebacker safety role. And John Saunders has taken to it brilliantly. And then the other safeties, Trey Washington, backed up by Key Lawrence. And Yam Banks, the transfer from South Alabama, backed up by Lewis Moore. They are 16 and 7 respectively. Now, Ole Miss arguably did its best work in the portal specifically by filling out that depleted secondary. Now, the transfer additions are where they really filled it out, and they had to. They lost both of their starting quarterbacks, Amari Walton, DeAndre Prince, from last season's record-breaking 11-win team. But Trey Amos has been as good as advertised since he got here. And he didn't play the role for Alabama last year that they recruited him to play. He was more of a nickel corner for them. So Ole Miss is an opportunity for him to reestablish value going into the NFL draft. And he's playing like it. It's Trey Harris and Trey Amos going at each other all day, every day in practice. He's been good. I'm not worried about him, not one bit. Isaiah Hamilton or Chris Graves, they'll be fine too. They're going to be solid. They've been in a battle, all camp opposite Trey Amos. I placed Jaden Kennedy behind John Saunders because I don't know who his backup is. I think it's Jaden Kennedy. But that hybrid linebacker safety spot, it's reserved for a unique player. Usually a unique veteran player. So John Saunders has been dominating that snap share ever since he took it over and transitioned to safety last year in camp. And Banks, he didn't get the same transfer shine as Walter Nolan or Princely Uman-Mielen, Juice Wells, Key Lawrence even, in the same secondary class that he was in. Key Lawrence left Oklahoma in the same contention window, but Ole Miss needs that third cornerback. And I'm curious if it is Brandon Turnage because of the injury stuff. He moved back to that position, did Brandon Turnage cornerback from safety once he transferred from Alabama to Tennessee. But now this is the next level show it year. You're at cornerback in your money year. Can you be that for Ole Miss? Can you bring that value? Which brings us finally in this, what is today? Tuesday, August 27, 2024 edition of Talk of Champions. 3 anchor players for your Ole Miss Rebels in 2024-25. What is an anchor player? Just like in the MCU, the Marvel Universe, right? With Wolverine as an anchor being in that universe, in the multiverse. Number 1 is obviously Jaxson Dart. I believe in Walker Howard. I believe in Austin Simmons. But Ole Miss will go as far as Jaxson Dart takes them. It's simple, but it's true. If anyone asks you, why are you so confident about Ole Miss? You could go to the transfers. You could go to this, that, and the other. Lane Kiffin, blah, 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 blah. You should first start with Jaxson Dart is a third-year starting quarterback, one of the most tenured quarterbacks in the country. He's got the 4th best odds, or tied for the fourth best odds in the country for the Heisman. Anytime you have that kind of resume at quarterback, that's a contender. Then you can talk about the surrounding cast, the supporting cast. Now, he needs to improve his deep ball efficiency in other areas. Of course he does. But few teams in college football wouldn't trade for Ole Miss's enviable starting depth at quarterback. And this is Jaxson Dart's legacy year. That's what makes it really intriguing. Because he's going to put a stamp on it. Where does he end up as far as Ole Miss's quarterback, Mount Rushmore? Someone said the other day, do you think he's better than Matt Corral? I do. Oh, that's a debate though. But that's a debate for another day. He's the number 1 anchor player. Number 2, it's the first of 2 surprises. Jerquan Scott. I'm as surprised as you are. Because, like Yan Banks, he was an unsung, in many ways, transfer addition. He only visited Ole Miss. He committed. He signed. There was a story or stories written. But he didn't get the same shine as Walter Nolan. You don't see Andy Staples or J.D. Pickle, my guys, the On3 national college football recruiting analysts, talking about Jerquan Scott necessarily. But Ole Miss landed him to obviously now, as we've seen through camp, to step in and start. Maybe then when we were writing those stories, we didn't know quite how big of a role Ole Miss was recruiting him to play. But he's been the Rebels starting center since the spring, and that is notable for a number of reasons, not the least of which Caleb Warren was the starter there for 3 seasons. You just don't typically see that. It speaks to how good Jerquan Scott's been. Ole Miss needs him to hold up, to dominate that center snap share, because what that does is allows Ole Miss to tap into the invaluable versatility of Jeremy James, which we already knew about. But Caleb Warren now, too, he's been really solid at guard. Now, this is his first time really playing guard, and he could play right or left. He can play both guards. James can play either guard. He could also play either tackle if he needs to. Jeremy James could start, like I said, on Saturday. So could Caleb Warren. Don't be surprised by either of them. But like the dude's rug in the Big Lebowski, Jerquan Scott is the rug that brings the offensive line room together. Number 3, and finally, John Saunders. Listen, everybody's going to talk about Jaxson Dart this preseason. Everybody's going to talk about Trey Harris and Walter Nolan and Princely Uman-Mielen and blah, 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 blah. We only got a few more days left of this. But one guy that deserves all kinds of praise for how solid and good and what he means to his teammates in the back end of that defense that was overhauled, John Saunders. Trey Washington is up there too, but John Saunders got something that Trey doesn't have, and I'll tell you that in a minute. Walter Nolan has a case. He does as an anchor player, but he's only been here. He hadn't even played a game for Ole Miss yet. Same with Princely Umaniel. They have a case, but they haven't played yet. How can that be an anchor player? I'm going with John Saunders because he's playing one of the most valuable roles in a Pete Golding defense, that hybrid linebacker safety, and he's doing it better than most anybody has yet. At least at Ole Miss in that 4-2-5. He's a veteran, returning starter on the back end, but unlike Trey Washington, who I love, going to be an NFL player, solid as all get out, all league caliber, John Saunders still has plenty of playmaking upside. I think Trey's kind of who he is. You know who Trey is. But John Saunders, he just now, this is his second year playing safety. He transitioned last fall, came from corner after he transferred in from Miami of Ohio. And when he made that move, when he did that, he turned himself into a legit next-level prospect. Not that he wasn't already. Oh, I got my producer over here asking me, better than Tony Connor? Slow down. But also, Tony was the next Ed Reed. I said Tig, it was Tony. Derrick Henry chopped his knee. So, no producer flip. No, he's not the next Tony Connor. But he's still John Saunders, a really good all-league caliber player. And what I've grown to really, really appreciate about him, is his matter-of-factness. Ball is life with that dude. He sat down for the Ivy League. He don't care about interviews or photo shoots. He doesn't care about the self-promotion. He's trying to play ball. He came to Ole Miss to better himself in his new school, and he's done just that. Give him his plaudits, man. He deserves it. He's also a stabilizing, galvanizing, playmaking presence for a secondary that saw more turnover than most every other position at Ole Miss in the offseason. I'm a big John Saunders fan, okay? Big John Saunders fan. And also, remember, I don't know who his backup is. It's the only position. I have no clue. I think it's Jaden Kennedy. Don't take my word for it, number 28. But I'm pretty sure that that's John's spot. It's a little bit different. And that'll do it for another edition of your Talk of Champions. Here's the thing. We've gotten to the end of the race. The long dog days of summer have come to an end. I ask you now, and tell me on the Ole Miss Spirit, OMSpirit.com, 13, what's the record going to be? Because I'm going to tell you what I think it's going to be. I don't care, 10-2. But here's a preview for the next Talk of Champions pod. If it is 10-2, and someone brought this up to me, and it's the next pod topic that makes too much sense. If it is 10-2, but both of those losses are to Georgia, do they still make the playoff? We'll see. The Ivy League is powered by RiverLand Roofing and the Ole Miss Spirit for all your roofing needs. Text or call RiverLand Roofing today, 662-644-4297. That's 662-644-4297. Visit them online at riverlandroofing.com. And we're taking you all the way to kickoff and beyond all day, every day over at the Ole Miss Spirit on 3. Go to omspirit.com today. Sign up for an annual subscription for half off the regular price. That's right, half off. To celebrate kickoff, you can get a sub to the Spirit. Hang out with this idiot and all other Ole Miss idiots that just live and breathe this stuff for $5, not $10, $5. You just got to sign up today with promo code KICKOFF24. That's KICKOFF24. Practice reports, daily recruiting scoop. Your pressing Ole Miss questions answered in my Monday message board only mailbag. Wednesday got a war room coming. Everything, so much more at the Ole Miss Spirit, omspirit.com. Sign up today. KICKOFF24 is the promo code, omspirit.com. Until next time, thank you, God bless, and be good to each other. It's time. Let's go.